This is Hardman Farm. I have dreams since I was a little child of going inside this house. Unfortunately, it's closed today, but they do tours during the week.
How could I let my wife down? She's always wanted to see this house. So we came back the next Saturday. You can come with us and visit West End so we can all be loving the real world.
Hi, my name is Georgianne. I'm the newest docent here at Hardman Farm State Historic Site. Docent is just a fancy word for a tour guide of historic places, which we are. This is also the newest historic site in Georgia. We were given the property by the Hardman family. It's 173 acres that we have in 1999. It took about 15 years to get the things we have ready to show you today. And we opened in 2014, so we haven't been here a long time, and we're constantly finding out new things and finding new things around the property. But the man who built the house, the gazebo that's on the Indian Mound, and about 15 of the outbuildings out here was Captain James Paul Nichols. He was born in Milledgeville, Georgia, which was the capital of Georgia at the time, in 1835. And he married a young lady named Kate Latimer. They had a daughter, Anna Ruby, and Kate's mother, Augusta Latimer, all lived together in Milledgeville and moved up here in 1870. That's when he built the house and all the outbuildings. Anna Ruby was 10 at the time, and they were the only family that lived here full time. They lived here for 23 years and ended up selling the most of the property and the house to an Atlanta businessman, Calvin Honeycutt. He was a wealthy businessman, made his fortune back after the Civil War, and was a widower. He had 6 children, and they were getting older and having their own children, so he wanted a place for his children and grandchildren to come for the summer. So they didn't live here full time, they just came in the summertime, and that was for about 10 years. Then he sold the property to Dr. Lamartine Hardman. Dr. Hardman was a medical doctor. He's from Commerce, Georgia, which at the time was called Harmony Grove. And his father was a doctor, his brother was a doctor. They opened a hospital over there. They owned the cotton mill over there. He had about 13 farms all over Georgia and North Florida, did experimental farming, and he wanted this land to start a dairy farm, which he didn't have up to now, and up to 1903. And to do some experimental farming, mostly with corn on this property. So he was also a bachelor when he bought this property in 1903. Keep that in mind. He was about 45 years old, but he did eventually marry and have a family, and that family grew to grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they all came out here and enjoyed the place during the summers through 1999, when we had the family donated the property to us. But since it was a dairy farm and had experimental crops growing, there had to be somebody here full time in order to take care of that stuff. So you pass this house on your way down from the parking lot, the dairy manager's house. That house was built in 1908 by Dr. Hardman for a dairy manager and his family. He had a couple not work out through the years, so by 1920 he went ahead and called his friend Bob Minish from over in Commerce and asked he and his wife Benny Maud to come out and take care of the property for him and run the dairy business. So this is Bob and Benny Maud Minish. They came over from Commerce with their 6 children. Lived in this house for a little while, but they kind of outgrew it. And we'll see a big house that's on the other side of the creek from the big house that they eventually remodeled and lived over there. 3 generations of Minishes took care of this property. They lived here full time from 1920 through 1999. The last grandson, Bruce Minish, was here when we got the property and was very instrumental in telling us what was what, because he had been here full time since he was a child. He was practically born here. So we'll head on down this road toward the house. It's made by infusing gold dust in with the glass as it's heated. That makes the ruby red color. If they had wanted blue glass, they would have infused copper dust to make it look blue. That's the original doorbell. We used to be able to ring it from outside, but one of our docents pulled the string too hard in the house. Our slate painted to look like marble, which was a trend in Victorian times, I'm told. And the shallow fireplace area with the basket. This is one of the baskets that's still intact. He burned coal in his fireplaces. So he would have had to have gotten his coal from maybe northern Alabama or even West Virginia, had a horse and wagon to bring it in. Now, you're probably wondering by this point, how did he have all this money to build such a beautiful house and have all this property and get coal for his fireplaces, order his stuff from Italy? He got his money the old-fashioned way. He inherited it. So Captain Nichols was in the Civil War when they lived in Milledgeville. He actually contracted malaria while he was procuring horses for cavalry during the Civil War. He was with the governor's horse guard. So when he got back, he was looking for a place to recuperate. His wife had some mental issues, and we'll talk about when we get to her room later, and was looking for a place, a retreat for her as well. They, as well as Mr. Honeycutt, everybody who went through the Civil War lost everything that they fought for the South. Honeycutt was able to build his business back up fairly quickly. He sold gas and plumbing fixtures. So that's probably how he and Honeycutt, Nichols and Honeycutt knew each other. He probably bought all his fixtures from him. And so he built his business back up, but one of Captain Nichols' uncles from Connecticut, his mother's brother, passed away. His mother had already passed, and so had his older sister, so all the money came to him. So he was able to build the house, and he actually bought 2,600 acres when he originally bought property up here. So he owns like all what's Helen and Nacoochee and all that good stuff. So that's how he got his money. But going to Dr. Hardman, this is his official governor's portrait. I don't think I mentioned up to now, he was not just a farmer and a doctor and an entrepreneur. He was also governor of Georgia from 1927 to 1931. This is his official governor's portrait that they did have hung here. And this is his piano. He brought this over from his house in Commerce. This piano is actually older than the house. It's from the 1830s. We still tune it and play it during our Victorian Christmas. So since all of y'all are local, you got to come back one of the first 3 weekends of December. It gets better every year. And somebody will be in here. Captain Nichols and his wife Kate will be in here to greet you. And we'll have singers, sometimes a harp, and somebody playing the piano. Two things about the Hardmans again. I mentioned he was a bachelor when he bought the place. He was about 45, but he was courting a young lady from Valdosta, Georgia, named Emma Griffin. He met her at a Baptist convention down there. Her grandkids told us that she did come up here to visit for a few weeks during the summers while she was courting Dr. Hardman. But 1907 rolls around and she's still not married, and she's about to turn 25. A guy down in Valdosta asked her to marry him, and she goes ahead and says yes. She buys a dress, accepts the gifts, plans the wedding, and Dr. Hardman finds out. Well, when he finds out, he wants to talk to her. So he wrote her a letter, and the grandkids gave us the actual letter he wrote. And a little bit of it says, "I do not wish to make you or anyone unhappy if I called, but I hope you will pardon me for saying I love you, and I'm very anxious to see you. Can I see you? Will come on first train. Yours very sincerely, Dr. Hardman." So he even signed his love letters, Dr. Hardman, but he really loved her and he didn't want to lose her. So she told him, yes, come see me. He got on the train and went down to Valdosta and asked her to marry him. Don't know what happened to Mr. Clark. They got rid of him somehow. But she also told Dr. Hardman, you're not leaving until we're married this week. So the newspaper announcement says that Miss Emma Griffin of Valdosta married Dr. Hardman of Commerce in the parlor of the Griffin home in Valdosta, 10 p.m. on, I believe it was March 26, 1907. And then the couple went on to their honeymoon in New York and then on to Canada. So they did get married. I'm sure Mr. Clark went on to have a fine life, but we don't know what happened to him. But she did keep the dress. She didn't wear it during her marriage ceremony to Dr. Hardman, but she kept it, took it on her honeymoon, and got a picture made in it. So if you come over here, I've got a great picture of Miss newly married Miss Emma Griffin Hardman in the dress she would have worn if she had gone through with the wedding to Mr. Clark. So you can tell it was going to be a fancy wedding. And this is Dr. Hardman on the same honeymoon, and he is 50 years old and she's 25. So it's a big age difference, but their children, all the notes and letters we have from their children, their grandchildren, everybody who remembers him together say that they just had a wonderful, loving relationship. And then 4 kids, tons of grandkids and tons of great-grandkids that all came out to this place in the summers through 1999. This is the family parlor where the family would have sat around, maybe read, played games, looked at their pictograph. One of our docents just donated this beautiful organ. They would maybe play some music and sang family songs or hymns. But the focal point of this room is the portrait above the fireplace. And we believe this to be a portrait of Anna Ruby Nichols. Captain Nichols and his wife Kate had one daughter. Her name was Anna Ruby, and she was 10 years old when they moved up here from Milledgeville. The story goes that Anna Ruby and her father were riding horses on their property. Remember, I said he bought 2,600 acres originally. They were riding north on their property and came across 2 beautiful waterfalls, and so he named them for his daughter Anna Ruby. So if you've been to Anna Ruby Falls, you know Anna Ruby Nichols. You'll see these fire extinguishers in different places around the house and in the kitchen too. Dr. Hardman put those in. Like I said, he was very safety and health conscious, which makes sense. He was a doctor. And we'll go in this bedroom first. We have this set up kind of like a kid's room, because when the Hardmans were coming out here all those summers, they had a big ping pong table in here, and they called it the ping pong room.
Okay.
I said there were chandeliers in every room. There are, except for this one. It's missing. Somebody said one time that, well, maybe they hit it with the ping pong ball and broke it. They could have. But I'm glad that at least one's not here so you can see the pipe that the gas would have come in to light. And so it's like that with all the chandeliers. And all the bedrooms have these wall chandeliers as well, or gasometers. Just turn some gas on, light it, and have light to sleep by or whatever. Another thing that all the bedrooms have, she's already found, is the sink. It's a marble top with a porcelain bowl, probably bought from the Honeycutt line. And you notice it has 2 taps. So he had running water to this property. I don't think I've mentioned that up to now. We're told it was a cistern that was high up on the property, so it was gravity fed. Spring water was gravity fed to the property. So he had water in the kitchen, in the house. You could turn on the tap and have running water in all the bedrooms. And he also had, the fountain was going all the time, and he had running water out to the picnic area on the mound. But he also had hot water in all the bedrooms. In the kitchen as well. So when we get to the kitchen, I'll show you how he heated it. I can't imagine it was hot when it got up here, but it sure would have been nice, you know, for the Nichols to wake up on a cold winter morning and be able to splash their face with some warm water in 1870.
Really?
Crazy. Oh, and also closets. All the rooms have closets, which was rare at the time. This set of stairs goes up to the attic area, and then another set goes up to that cupola. And we just don't know, there's really nothing up there. And this was Anna Ruby's room. So we guessed that, and I think the Hardmans were told us that they had guessed as well. They left all the pictures that were hanging here in place, and I think the Honeycutts did as well, of all little girls. And again, she was 10 when they moved here. She grew up in this house. Captain Nichols also built a little church. If you've seen the little Gothic-looking church is on the other side of the property here, or when you come out of the driveway of our parking lot, it's on the right immediately right. Anna Ruby was married in that church, and she moved on to Atlanta and then Macon. She married very well. Dr. George Payne, who was the state pharmacist or state chemist of Georgia. And yeah, her sink was the only one that was painted. So she had some fancy fancy things, I'm sure. This was her bed, we're pretty sure, with the ornate carving. You'll see 2 beds in those rooms because the Hardmans would bring as many as 30 people or more with them, cousins and friends and things of their kids, when they would come in the summertime. So they needed lots of beds. We're even told they had beds in the family parlor so that, you know, everybody had a place to sleep. But this was Anna Ruby's bed, and that's probably one that they brought in later. But then
These
you
are
see-
pictures.
Yeah, all the paintings or pictures like this you see are all from the Nichols. The only ones that were put in by the Hardmans are ones that are of them. They didn't put in any other paintings. It was like perfect when they got the place. But this room was Kate Nichols' room. Captain Nichols' wife, Anna Ruby's mother. And I mentioned briefly that she had some mental issues before they moved up this way. If you're native Georgians or have been here a while, you may have heard of the state hospital in Milledgeville. It was there in the 1800s, and it was called the Lunatic Asylum. At one time, it was the largest mental health facility in the world with over 12,000 patients. It was huge. It only closed in the early 2000s, and I think it's pretty much dismantled today. But Kate was a frequent patient there when she lived in Milledgeville. She married Captain Nichols in 1856. The following year, she gave birth to a baby boy. He only lived 2 months. About a year after that, we have the first time that she was admitted to the state hospital. She was in there for a little over a year, and then in 1860, she gave birth to Anna Ruby. When Anna Ruby turned 3 months old, we have records she was back in the hospital again. She's in the hospital for a little over a year again, and then she comes out, and it's 1861. She gives birth to another baby boy, and the Civil War starts. So Captain Nichols goes off to war. We believe her mother, Augusta, had come to live with her by this time and help her take care of Anna Ruby. They also lived on, not a lavish plantation, but the Nichols family had a plantation with slaves at the time in Milledgeville. So they would have had some help at home while Captain Nichols was away. But then Sherman's army marched through. We have neighbor accounts through diaries and such that Kate Nichols was attacked by Union soldiers. So that was another notch in her mental health. And then in 1862, her second son passes away before he turns 1 year old. And of course, all the other things that probably went on while the war was going on. So by the time Captain Nichols comes back from war, she's lost 2 children. She's been in the hospital 3 times. He inherits the money. They're ready to get out. So I can see where he built this room with Kate in mind. She probably spent most of her time, her 23 years in this house, in this room. She would have had a beautiful view of her gazebo and the mountain behind, because those trees wouldn't have been so tall. She would have seen the beautiful magnolia blooms in the spring. The fountain out here would have been going all the time. She would have had a beautiful view of that. Kind of, this time of day, it's kind of hard to see, but the game house across the creek, you can see it's very large. It was just a top portion where Captain Nichols had a billiards table, probably some card tables and comfortable chairs. There was a couple of bedrooms up there for men friends to come over. She would have been able to see his comings and goings, and he also had his hunting dogs in a kennel down below. So the downstairs of that house, before the Miniches remodeled it, was a kennel for hunting dogs. Again, she would have been able to see that. They built hooks into the walls here and one behind the door. And one of the techniques that we read about that they used in the hospital was to hang a hammock between 2 hooks and swaddle the patient gently to calm them down if they were agitated. So he built those into the room. And also the room was built with a open passageway to the next bedroom, which is where her mother, Augusta, stayed. So we'll go with Augusta. This was Augusta Latimer's room. So she was right across the hall and connected to Kate's room, so she would be there if she needed her. Some accounts we have say that she was a nurse, so she would have been able to help Kate if she had any health issues. And also, I like to talk about the church some more when I come in here, because Augusta it was said was a Sunday school teacher at this church, and she's also the first person that was buried back there. Like I said, none of the Hardmans are buried over there except for the youngest daughter, Emma. Augusta's the only Nichols that's buried over there. All the rest of the Nichols are buried in Milledgeville. So the church was built by Captain Nichols because the Nichols family was Presbyterian, and there was no Presbyterian church up here when they moved. So he quickly had the church built, and Nacoochee Presbyterian became an active congregation. They grew to the point where they outgrew this little church and moved down the road, and they are still Nacoochee Presbyterians to today. The church sat empty through the Honeycutt years. He didn't really have any use for the church up here. And then Dr. Hardman was interested in it when he bought the property. Anna Ruby still held the deed after the Presbyterian congregation moved out. So she came up and signed the deed over to Dr. Hardman when he bought the property. So he put a Baptist congregation, and it is Crescent Hill Baptist Church to this day. It's still an active congregation. And now one thing in this room I like to talk about real quick, because we don't talk about the Honeycutts too much, but they left us a little something in this room. They left us a height chart. So the Honeycutts had 6 children, and they were mostly grown. The older ones were definitely grown by the time they were coming out here in the summer, and some of them were having children of their own. So we've got Eddie was the oldest daughter, and then Judy the date she put her height was 1897. And then this one's little Calvin, he would have been a grandson, because Calvin Honeycutt didn't have a son named Calvin, but he did have a grandson named Calvin. So we're glad they left that. We're glad the Hardmans never painted over it. Most of the baseboards and door frames have never been painted. We left them just like they were, and the Hardmans left them just like they were. They all had servants. These were the ones that just came in the summer, would bring servants to serve them and help the family. The kitchen is out back. We'll go there last. So they would cook the food in the kitchen in a wood-burning stove, bring the food up to the porch and go in this room, which is today an ADA bathroom, but it was the plating room at the time. So they would put the food on plates, serve the family around the table, and then pick up the dirty plates and take them into the butler's pantry in that corner and wash them in the copper sink that had hot and cold running water in 1870. And then this is the only green mantle. You know, it's still slate painted to look like marble, but this one's green, all the other ones are black. And this portrait is of our Captain Nichols. Only portrait we have of him. We've got several photographs. If you look on some of the information panels, we have photographs of him and Anna Ruby, but that's his official portrait. And then the phone is what most people's eye is drawn to in this room. Why is there a phone in the dining room? Why is there a phone here at all? Dr. Hardman had it put in, and he had it put in for one reason only, was to keep the lights on. So I mentioned that Captain Nichols had gas lighting, and it was gas lighting in the house up through about the 1910s, between 1910 and 1920. I'm not sure exactly what year, but Dr. Hardman had found out about hydroelectric power and bought a hydroelectric generator and had it put in at the mill up the street that he owned. That mill has been part of this property through everybody that's owned it. It's been there since 1824 in some form or another. Always been a grist mill, but he put in a hydroelectric generator and generated electricity for this house, for some of the outbuildings like the dairy barn, and also the church. So they had electricity, but the only problem was when the mill workers went home at night, the electricity went off because they had to turn off the generator. So the mill workers would warn the family that was here during the summer. They would flash the lights a few times and let them know 5 minutes the lights are going off. So sometimes Dr. Hardman wanted the lights to stay on if he had special guests, if they were wanting to stay up later. So he put in a phone that only connected to the mill to tell them to stay longer to keep the lights on. That's the only reason he put it in. Now later when he became governor in 1927, it came in handy because he was able to hook it up to some newly strung telephone lines from Atlanta and keep in touch with Atlanta and the governor's business. So this was considered the summer governor's mansion when he was governor of Georgia. So this was his bedroom. He had 2 closets, and you can see where we left this undone, the only thing that we did to the house when we came in was to put a little bit of whitewash on the walls and the ceilings. We didn't do that in here to show you kind of what it looked like when we got the place. Again, the Honeycuts and Hardmans only came during the summer. It wasn't any, I think they thought more about the history of the place than they would have wanting to remodel it. So all we did was a preservation of what was here, not a restoration. So any of the places where the molding is broken out there, our mechanical engineers that work for us or built this mold, and you put plaster through so they can make some and replace the little pieces out there. Again, that's all being into place, and you can see here where there's even water damage on this one. It's some evidence that they tried to put a bathroom in the closet in the room that was Augusta's room. It was probably during the Hardman times. We believe that Emma and Dr. Hardman slept in that room when they came up here. So that might be what this water damage came from. But the reason they got the idea to put a bathroom up there, if you notice there's a lot of chamber pots, there's a chamber pot in all the rooms, was because Captain Nichols built a bathroom for himself in his room in 1870. So come on in, everybody can come in.
Everybody can fit in here, huh?
Everybody can fit in here.
Oh my
Now the
goodness.
Hardmans did bring this bathtub with them. This is from the 1800s. So the Hardmans put in a new tub, but there would have been a bathtub, probably bigger. And you can see the pipes back there where the water came in. So he had hot and cold running water for a bathtub, had the same type of sink that's in all the bathrooms. And then behind this wall, he had a flushing toilet. Today, it's a more modern toilet that the Hardmans put in at some point, but it would have been the only flushing toilet in the house or on the property, for that matter, while the Hardmans were coming out here with all those kids and stuff. But Captain Nichols built this in 1870 when he built the house, and he had a holding tank or a septic tank underneath for any of the running water to be held in and then eventually flushed out into the creek and down to the Chattahoochee. But this is an example of the knob and tube wiring that Dr. Hardman put in for electricity, and they were still using that in 1999 when we got here. So we had to upgrade it. So this is the mud porch, and if you remember seeing a picture of Captain Nichols with his hunting dogs, it's on that first panel that I talked about. He's standing right here. There wouldn't have been any screens in his time. So he was just standing here at the top of the steps holding court with his hunting dogs. And I can just imagine him coming up all muddy, hanging his muddy clothes on a hook and being able to go into his bathroom and clean up before he went in the house. The bell is from Southern Railway. It was a gift to Dr. Hardman in 1902. He must have already put the word out that he had purchased or was going to purchase this property, because it's engraved on the other side with the words Elizabeth on the Chattahoochee, which is what Dr. Hardman called the place. His mother was Elizabeth Colquitt Hardman, and he named it for her. So that was her dinner bell at the time. So if all the kids were down playing in the creek or whatever, they could hear that bell, they knew to come on up. And she also had this breezeway built. The main reason people built kitchens away from houses in the 1800s and early 1900s is because they used wood burning stoves, and the kitchens burned down quite often. We think this one burned down at least twice. We know it did once because we have a newspaper article from 1880 telling us about it. But Captain Nichols would have built this particular kitchen. And the stove is actually from the 1940s. The Hardmans put it in. So Captain Nichols would have had a different wood burning stove, but it still would have had, like this stove, a water reservoir. So as you can see, there was running water coming into the house or into the kitchen. And they would have had some held in the water reservoir while the wood burning stove was hot. During Honeycuts and Hardmans only came in the summer, so it had to be terribly hot. But they would have kept the stove burning all the time while the families were here in order to cook them meals whenever they needed it. So the water would stay hot, and then they would force that hot water into a tank to hold it. And when you turned on a tap in the house for hot water, that's where it came from. But lots of old-fashioned gadgets and things in here that they would have used. Some of them are props that we have purchased over the years to, that are of the period, and others are butter. Yeah, Dr. Hardman did make butter here on the property, and these were butter molds. I broke one day, so I'm careful about picking them up. So he would have had those to stamp his butter before he sold it. But my favorite part about the kitchen are these tables. Dr. Hardman put these in, and they're repurposed tables. He got the slate tops from somewhere else on the property, and where that somewhere else was Captain Nichols' game room. That's how we know Captain Nichols had a billiard table, because this is it. That's the center portion of the table. This is one of the ends.
That makes sense.
We think it's at the top of the dairy barn where we store stuff. We were digging around in the corn cribs and found some of the pockets. So they saved, pockets for some reason, some of them. And we also have the rail. This was actually on this side of the table, and it has the manufacturer's label on it. So it was made in New York City between 1856 and 1860. And when we had people tagging and appraising and telling us what we were finding around the property, he said that if this billiard table was together and in good shape today, it would be worth about $500,000. But that would have been what Captain Nichols had in his game room. And Dr. Hardman, being a staunch Baptist, he was anti-gambling, anti-drinking.
So that's why he would have done
He would have repurposed it instead of giving it away, or, he was a practical man too. He wouldn't have just axed it, like a skill or something. But it still works well. The room beside it, we believe, that work the property, believe it was the storeroom at one time, because when the newspaper article that talks about the kitchen burning down in 1880 said something about the storeroom behind the kitchen was saved because of the abundance of water on the property. So they would have had the running water. They would have been able to put out the fire before it got to the storeroom. But there are 2 beds in there.
Yeah.
And the information panel says it's a servant's quarters.
Yeah.
We don't believe servants, other than maybe Captain Nichols' original servants right after he built the house that he brought with him from Milledgeville, ever lived on the property. We know that there were lots of people in the area that worked for Dr. Hardman, especially milking cows. They would have had their own homes and just come to work.
Right.
And same with the servants. So you've got to see the dairy barn, the carriage house. There's some carriages in there to look at. Horse barns over here. So you guys look, and any questions, come back and see me.
Sometime during the early 1900s, the Nacoochee Presbyterian Church quit holding services in the church building. The church remained unused until 1921, when Dr. Hardman allowed a group of Baptists to use the church as their place of worship. There were 30 charter members, and they decided upon the name of Crescent Hill for their church. Descendants of the original family still attend the church.
We hope this video intrigues you to go see the house and the grounds for yourself. Hardman Farms is well worth the trip. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification button so you don't miss other videos. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.